Have you not known, have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints nor is weary. There is no searching of his understanding. He gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might, he increases strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint.
Greetings to Mom, to my aunts and uncles. I want to say at the outset of this video that each one of you hold a very special place in my heart. I'm thankful for the influence that you have had in my life. Boy, this brings back a memory. Lots of memories, in fact. I don't think we saw Grandma very often that she didn't have her apron on, unless she was going to church, of course. And Grandma was also quite well known for her pickles, and to me, she was well known for her canned beef. I'm thankful for the rich heritage that has been brought down to me. I was privileged to know my grandmother and to know her faith in the Lord, but I was not so fortunate with my grandfather. Since Grandpa died when Mom was only 10, I was really curious what kind of man he was. So I took the opportunity and asked each one of the aunts and uncles and my mom what it was like to grow up in the Engbrecht home.
Well, I guess it was pretty exciting, I would think, because nowadays it's altogether different. Being on the farm, and I was the oldest, and we had a lot of fun, I think.
We enjoyed it, going to country school and whatever, you know. We were a pretty close-knit family.
Well, it was great. We had a lot of fun.
I am the youngest of the 7, and I really don't know too much on the farm because I was 11 when they moved off.
Oh, we had a wonderful time. I guess you would classify us as a very poor family, but I did not know that. We just had our own games and fun.
There were hard times, but you know, when I look back, we had the kind of fellowship that many of us are missing nowadays.
I think some of the greatest memories that I have, of course, are where we as a family shared time sitting around in the living room. I can remember crawling over a little rocking chair as a very small child and playing, and I remember a lot of the times when company would come, particularly the last 2 years that Dad was sick. We had company, we had relatives, and other people, strangers coming. Those are the things I fondly remember.
And it was in the 30s. I was born in 25. By 1931, I started first grade. But it was wonderful because Mom always had everything. She baked all this stuff.
Of course, Marvin and I, we had to wait till, well, I was almost 8, and he was almost 6 before we could go to school because we lived 3 miles away from the farm that we lived on. And so then the next spring they moved, and then I could go to school over where the home place was on the farm on 81. So I had kind of a late start. Marvin had kind of an early start. And we always walked home. Always carried a lunch bucket.
How far was it?
I don't think it was more than a fourth of a mile.
I'll never forget one time, Dad, it was so terrible cold, it was 20 below zero, and Dad walked us to school. I think it was Benny and I, he had each one of us by the arm, and he walked us to school to make sure we got to school. Then he'd get he warmed up in school, and then he'd walk home.
Winters, 1936, or even, well, we're talking about winters. 1936, Dad took us to school, and it was 36 below zero, and he had a team of horses, and a sleigh instead of a wagon because there was so much snow anyhow. We had a big blanket that we'd crawl under, and he had the straw and everything, and then as long as there was smoke coming out of that schoolhouse, we had to go to school. That teacher would always stay overnight when it was that cold, and it was I never will forget it. You know, I can just vision, you know, what it was. Every once in a while I'll think about it, how Dad would get us to school.
Him taking us to school during the snowstorm in a sled all covered over, and we were just under a big blanket. Things of that kind I can remember.
But we used to walk across in the wintertime. We almost had a pond there in that one field that we'd walk across. But of course we couldn't walk across unless there was ice or something, so we walked across it in the wintertime. That would be a lot closer to school that way instead of walking around.
We had some sad times, but we were taught to pray. I even remember the very severe thunderstorms that we would have. And when they came, why, all we did is we just come in the house. Mother says, "Come on in," and Dad and us would say, "Well, there might be a bad lightning storm, so we'll just kneel and pray." So then we just learned to commit it all to the Lord, and we got through the tough times as well as the good times.
Every morning we would have devotions, and he would sit at one end of the table, Mom would sit at the other end of the table, and then there were three of us seated on one side of the table on a bench, and three of them on the other side, and Viola was usually sitting on Mom's lap or in a high chair, and we had devotions.
And Dad always, in the mornings especially, if there was time, he would always read a scripture and have prayer, and we couldn't leave the table. We had to wait till he was through praying, even if it was almost too late to go to school. But then he said, "Okay, hurry, children. Grab your lunch buckets and go to school," and we'd take off.
I know people talk about depression, but really, we always had plenty of food. We always had chicken, and we always butchered beef and hog, and we had geese and ducks that we'd butcher, and of course Mom canned all that stuff. So as far as meat, I don't think we ever had a hard time with eating.
We didn't know we were poor. There was no way. What we lost in money was made up in love and caring at home. And I do not remember ever going hungry. I remember a lot of soup meals. I remember a lot of things of those kind of things that happened, but we had no clue that we were poor. We didn't know it. We didn't know any different.
You know, you grow up in a family that don't have anything. You really appreciate what you do have. And we never went hungry. We may not have had the steaks and all of that, but we've always had meat and potatoes on the table. Mom always canned a lot of stuff from the garden.
We went through the Depression. It was very difficult, and we made it. Being on the farm, you always had eggs, you always had meat, you always had milk, and we usually had enough harvesting wheat so that we could go ahead and take some wheat in to the colonies where they ground it into flour, and so we'd have flour. But usually, and of course after I got to be 12, 13 years of age, I would go ahead and take the eggs and the milk, eggs and cream rather, we separated the milk, eggs and cream to town, and usually we got enough for a few groceries besides what we needed. We had we had potatoes. We would have maybe 20, 30 bushels of potatoes we'd raise. So we had plenty of food as far as food is concerned.
You know, when I think back, I can't ever remember it was hard. Because we did what we had to do. We ate what we had on the table. And we might have to go down to the store and get a few things, and then come home and go from there.
1933, it was Dust Bowl. The grasshoppers was just unreal. We made it. We made that through it. We had the windmill as long as the windmill will run, and the cistern was right beside it. Mother had a garden, and that's what we lived off of, a garden.
Because there was a lot of poor people around then. We lived about the same as they did.
Usually on Saturday, late afternoon, Dad or Mom would send me down to Stanley Corner, which was only a mile away, with a 10 or 12 dozen case of eggs. And you have to remember, eggs were then 8-9 cents a dozen, so I'd get about $1, and we could buy 6 gallons of gas for $1. So we always filled up the car with gas, so we'd go to church the next morning. That was the big thing.
They were there as often as I'm sure that they were open, whether we had to go by horse and sled or wagon or by car. We were there.
And of course, that's all we knew. The only time we really got to go any place was to church, and we was always ready to go to church.
Practically all of our activities centered around going to church. It was on Sunday morning and, of course, prayer meeting night. However, we did not have a regular Sunday night service. We had what we call Christian Endeavor until Kenneth Robinson came along, and then he started Sunday night services more frequently than what we had them.
We used to go to church in the wintertime in an old horse and wagon, and how we'd put blankets in that old wagon and go to church in it, and covered us up.
Oh, church. I think church. And I love to sing, and my dad was a singer. He loved to sing too. So he and I would sing together, but I wanted to play the piano so bad. So I would use the kitchen table, and I would pound on the kitchen table as if I was playing the piano, and we would sing together. And then he said to me, "Martha, I hope someday we can afford a piano for you." And that stuck in my mind. My father never did see me play piano, but it was a year or so after he passed away that one of the neighbors had a piano for sale, and I think it cost $35. And Mother said, "We've got to get this, but I don't know how we're going to pay for it." And so we had to make installment payments. But I did get a piano, and I did have some lessons from the pastor's wife, and that to me meant so much. And I never really had about, I would say, 6 to 10 lessons in my life. But I wanted to play so bad. And of course, when I practiced was when the dishes were supposed to be done. It was a time that I spent lots of time piano playing, but I had my share of dishes too.
The first few years, like 2 and 3 and 4, he came in the house from outside. I always had a blanket on the floor, and I was underneath it, and he always asked Grandma, "Now, where's Vi? Where's Vi?" Grandma says, "I just don't know." And then Dad would say, "Now, Mom, you must know where Vi is. You must know where Vi is." And she says, she says, "There's a blanket on the floor, and it's never had a lump in there." And she says, "Why don't you check that out? I think we should do something with that lump under the quilt." And of course, then Dad would come over there, and he says, "I wonder what that lump is." Of course, with me, I start giggling, and he says, "Uh-oh, I found her."
I remember how I went out to pick corn with him when the rest of the kids were in school. And him and I picked corn, and I nearly froze to death. That's the way I felt like, because I couldn't get warmed up like he did. And then I got sinus, and then, from the awful cold. I don't know what month it was. Might have been November. And I loved to go with him. I'd rather be outside than to be in the house.
I remember going down there helping him plow, the fall when, just before he died. I was down there with my tractor. And David was supposed to drag, but I don't know, was it 2 or 3 horses? And he was starting to cry. I said to my brother Dave, is he sick? No, he don't like to do that.
He didn't want to drag with the horses, huh?
Yeah. He didn't want to walk, you know, he had to walk behind the drags, you know.
I had the most closeness with my dad. He would make rope, and he had a rope machine, and I still have it to this day. And I would when he said he had to make some halters for the horses or whatever, why I would be right there, and we'd go to the garage, and I would hold that fork, and he would string up the anyhow we would. I was just tickled to see how that would work, and I helped him, and I had real close ties with my dad.
They gave you the opportunity to talk to each other.
Yes. He was always, for some reason or other, it was always Dad that I went with.
I was the one that sat on his lap a lot in the evening, in front of because I was the sickly one in the bunch, the Kanakahan. That's what they called me, and because I was just sick so much, so Dad always felt sorry for me. So he'd have me sit on his lap and he'd rock me, and he'd tell me Bible stories. And
What were you sick from?
tonsillitis. I skipped a lot of school because I had tonsillitis so bad, and of course in those days they didn't believe in getting them out, which Mom said she wished she'd have done years and years ago. I finally had them taken out at 16.
But I never got a spanking from my dad that I can ever remember. Mother might have spanked, but I don't think that Dad ever did.
I remember a couple of lickings that I got from Dad. Particularly one time, I was supposed to watch the watch the calves, not to get into the grain. And I'd left the gate open. And one of them got in, and David picked up a rock and threw it and killed a young calf. And I had to run out to the field and get Dad home so he could butcher it. And I tell you, we really got it that time. There was always a wet rope in the tank. Somewhere along the line it seemed to be wet, and it hurt a little bit more. But I don't think that hurt us a bit. I think he knew it had to be. I don't ever remember my dad angry. I think it was discipline that was taught. And it was not one of abuse that I could ever think it was abuse. I never thought that then, and I don't think so now.
How big was the house?
We had one bedroom downstairs where Dad and Mom slept, and in the bedroom they had a crib, and the youngest one slept in there. The three of us boys slept upstairs in one room. The three girls slept in the other bedroom, and Viola, being the youngest, she was in the crib downstairs. So we had only 3 bedrooms with the 9 of us.
It was fun. It was kind of, there was times when it wasn't fun.
I slept with my sister Esther. Very interesting because I was a sleepwalker, and so was my brother Dave. And so he would come out of his bedroom, and I would come out of my bedroom. We don't know how we ever managed it, and we'd sit at the top of the stairs, and we'd visit. And all of a sudden, Mother would open up the stair door and say, "What are you doing? Now it's time to go back to bed." We'd get up and go back to bed. The next morning, she would tackle both of us and ask us what we were visiting. We didn't know a thing about it, not one thing. We don't remember anything, and that happened a few times, not many times, but it's remarkable how we never knew what happened.
Oh yeah, we'd do a lot of giggling, and Esther, of course, was the oldest. She was 9 years older than I was, so she'd get kind of upset with Martha and me because we giggled so much.
I was downstairs all the time. We had a baby bed down there, and it had spokes. And when I got too big to really sleep in it, I put my feet through the spokes. I mean, you know, when you got a bed, and that's the only place I could sleep. Then after Esther got married and left, then I went upstairs. We had 3 rooms up there. the boys were in one end and we were on the other, but when we got company and we needed an extra bed, then I went into the middle room and got into the baby bed. Because I always could fit there because I could stick my feet through the spokes.
I think Esther was with us when we made this decision that everybody else, as I went to school, had middle names, and I wondered why we would take and not have one. So we decided, let's just sit down and give everyone. We started with the oldest to the youngest, and we gave each one of us a middle name, and mine is stuck, mine is on record officially, and I have my middle name.
Did Grandma ever play tricks on you?
I don't think that our mother ever misled us in any way, in any trickery
But
or
I mean,
anything.
as far as
Games,
or whatever.
not that I
Jokes.
recall. I can't remember that at all. I can't remember
Did you do
that.
that to each other a lot?
Oh, yes. Oh, we did it all the time. I mean, I still have a bashful kidney from how they used to treat me in that outside washroom, that old toilet. But there's all kinds of things that happen there, and she would always make sure that she give us plenty of freedom that way.
I'll never forget the time when Ben and David and I were riding a horse, and David sat in the front, I sat in the middle, and Ben in the back, and Ben made that old horse kick, and we all fell off. David broke his arm. You know, I never rode a horse. I never cared to ride a horse after that. That scared me to death. Of course, Ben stood and laughed. And I'll never forget when David broke his arm, his bone was sticking clear out, and Esther come along and she grabbed it and she jerked it back in place.
And one thing about the farm is Mom always took one of the older ones that could drive on Saturday and go to town. We never could go to town because we didn't have no money to go. So when we got bored, Anna and Benny and I always went out to the sheep shed. Anna and I held the board across the open door, and Benny would go in and make the sheep jump across. We made the sheep jump across there, and when Grandma come home and she says, "How come those sheeps are out?" And we says, "We don't know." And she said, "Children." And then we says, "Well, we chased them out. We got bored." And we did things like that, you know. We didn't do any damage or anything, but we had a lot of fun.
What kind of games did you play as a kid?
They were self-made, self-taught games. Probably the fondest memory I have is I was a carpenter by trade as a young fellow. 8 years old, I started making stills. One Sunday afternoon when all of our relatives were there, I had manufactured stills. And I kept pumping them out. And that night when Mother went to gather the eggs, all the chickens were sitting on the floor. I'd cut up all the roosts. And so I got a good licking for that, and a good lecture and a licking for that. And lo and behold, on Monday morning, they went to harness the horses, and I had used all the hame straps for supports. And so I got another licking. But at the same time, we enjoyed that Sunday afternoon. One of the highlights of my time.
You had stilt races, didn't you?
You bet.
It would seem to me that the fondest memory would be when we would play ball together, or what we used to call zippy sticks. And I think that was one of the fondest memories I had. My biggest responsibility, or I think I found this to be rather a burden, but then also a joy, I did a lot of work and didn't have much time to play, but when we had time to play, I really did enjoy that.
What was it called? Zippy sticks?
How do you play zippy sticks?
Well, we made a little hole in the ground about that long and about that deep. Can you see me? And we had a little stick about that long. It was usually round. And then we had another stick about this big. And we take and put that stick across that hole and see once how far we could shoot it with the other stick. That was called zippy sticks. So, but I can't remember just what the scores were or anything, but we all had fun. We all took turns. Sides.
Was this a game that you guys made up?
I can't remember.
Something that was played a lot in schools?
I think it was a lot in school and with our cousins.
We had Chinese checker. We played a lot of that. Of course, we never were allowed to play cards. We never had cards. When we was outside a lot, we did a lot of running, tagging, playing tag, and hide and go seek and stuff like that.
It was so much fun because we played hide and seek at night. We had enough of us kids so that we could just really have a good time.
Oh, in the wintertime, fox and goose. We went out in the snow and we played, and there was really very little time in playing. It was mostly working. Sunday afternoon, we could play. But the rest of the time, we had our little chores to do. And mine was dishes, and I still hate them up to this day. But anyhow, I always had to do that, and then I got to start ironing, and I ironed hankies and dishcloths and stuff like that, so if in case I burned them, it wouldn't be a tragedy. I remember that Viola and I would take some cold coffee and a lunch to the field. And one time I remember Viola and me sitting on the horse and holding on to some of the things, and we'd go down to the field. My chores were in the summertime, the red wagon and my sandwiches and stuff to take it out in the field. And I was just going to learn how to milk some cows when we moved off the farm.
Well, I was this girl that loved to be outdoors more than indoors, and yet, as a girl, it meant you better be able to get at those dishes as soon as we were done. I was out in the garden and gathering the eggs and such things. I didn't do a whole lot of cooking, but it didn't make no difference. Mother was the one that really did. We didn't get to try out foods like many girls today probably do, mixing and things, because if it would have not worked out, we couldn't afford to have something not be good. But we, of course, would eat anything that we got into our hands, so it was good.
Helping with the dishes. That was the main thing. Mother always said, if you help with the dishes and sweeping the floors, doing the chores with the chickens and stuff like that when I was younger, and then as I grew older, then my responsibility was to help milk. And I would milk 2 or 3 cows, and then we'd help with separating the milk and feeding the calves and things like that.
I had to do the dishes a lot, and I didn't mind doing the dishes. Some of the rest didn't like to, but I helped Mom in the house a lot, and I watched her do a lot of baking, so I knew how to cook and stuff before I got married.
I had all kinds of different chores. I had 3 older sisters that made sure that I had something to do. And there was no end to what they wouldn't think of. And at the same time, I know I harassed them very often. And I did that, and I'll admit to that. But my chores were basically helping feed the chickens, taking care of some of the calves. I enjoyed the sheep for some reason or other. I enjoyed taking care of the sheep, and particularly when the lambs were born, feeding some of the bottle lambs that we had to help along and doing those kind of things. I think garden stuff, we all got into that. We tried to avoid some of that, but I think all of us became gardeners because of our mother.
When I was 16, almost 17, Dad passed away, and so I sort of became the farm manager and also took over the responsibilities that go along with farming.
You farmed primarily using horses then?
Yes, but Dad had bought a tractor about a year beforehand, and it was new, and we were very grateful for that because that really helped us out a great deal.
How much farmland were you farming?
200 acres. 200 acres we farmed. 160 where we lived, and 40, he had 40 acres about a mile east of our place.
We all took a turn on a lot of things. I didn't like to milk a cow when I was old enough to milk a cow because I didn't like the tail that she was putting across my face. And But anyhow, I helped Mother in the garden a lot when she was gathering up some of the vegetables and stuff.
Garden, that's another thing. Mother was always making a big garden, and there would be the days where we'd all have a chance to get down in a row and weed.
And I was the one that I was too small to help can, so I had to open the peas and pull the strings off of the string beans and clean the corn and stuff like that. And I always wondered why I had to work so hard and the rest of them didn't. Of course, I'm not spoiled at all, you know.
Well, I thought of your dad so much, I tell you. He did not have very many happy days because, you see, when the children were small and the times were tough, then he got sick, and then you know how it is when you're sick. He had, I say, he didn't have too many good years that you could really say prosperous, that we got into the tough years then, after he got sick, and then the 30s, they were awful tough.
One of the strongest memories I have is Dad's illness. I was 7 years old when I started to milk cows, and we'd go out to the barn, and Dad would be there milking a cow, and he would be coughing a lot and spitting and coughing, and of course we had no idea what was going on and what was wrong. But we soon learned, when I got to be 12 years of age, of course, he was very sick, and then the Lord healed him, and for a period of about 5.5 years before he passed away.
You know, he couldn't help us outside anymore. Marvin and I would go in to his bedroom, and we'd ask him a lot of questions, what to do and how to do it. And we knew that maybe one of these days he might not be with us, but as young as we all were, we was always hoping and praying that he was going to get better.
Before Dad died, I was the one that had to sit beside my dad's bed and read to him. He always wanted me to read to him, although I was only 10 years old, so I wasn't a very good reader.
What did he have you read?
Bible. He always had me read verses out of the Bible, and he also had me sing for it. You know, I can't imagine what I sounded like when I was 10 years old. But
Marvin and I don't know if the other children helped or not, but we were doing the chores, and Mother come and said, we better all come in, and because she said, I don't know how long Dad will last. And so we were all around him, but Mother was still thinking that maybe he'd come around, but we could see that he wouldn't be able to come around anymore.
It was sad, and of course I was 13. I had a birthday on the 12th. Dad passed away on the 9th, and we buried him on my birthday. It was something that I think of my dad a lot.
The day of the funeral, it was sad. The undertaker took me to the grave because I didn't know why they was putting him in the hole. And he says, the angels are going to come down. He has to be put in a hole. And the angels are going to come down after dark and take him. So he won't be in there very long. Just when it gets dark, then he's going to go up to heaven. So then I went to Mom and says, angels are coming. And she says, yeah. So that was about the most difficulty thing for me to understand.
of course, us kids were little. Ben and I and Viola were the youngest, and I was 10 years old. So I had been to a lot of funerals, so death wasn't that. I mean, we missed Dad and all, but as far as going on, we went ahead, you know. Of course, we watched Mom a lot, helped her a lot. It was really hard for Mother when Dad passed away. She maybe didn't show it, or she did show it the first few days, but there were days after that, after the funeral, that I can remember that it was very hard for her, and you could see that she was carrying a burden, wondering
what she would do with the family and how everything would turn out.
It was such a sad time for me because I was very, very close to my dad. And so I think we became closer in a sense because we knew that the main person was missing. And yet we leaned on Mother, and Mother learned to lean on us as children. And so that closeness came about.
And I think it's really turned out great for Mother. The way she carried on the rest of the time that she was on the farm, and then in Bridgewater, and most of everybody knows what a garden she had and everything.
I think 5 years we stayed on the farm. After Marvin left home and went to got married and was a minister, and David had to go to the service, and there was just Benny there at home to do the farming. Of course, David then didn't go to the service. He went to the sanitarium. Mom just said we just couldn't take it. I think Uncle Diedrich talked her into selling out and moving to town or something because it was just getting to be too much for her trying to do the farm.
Was that a hard move, do you think, for her?
Oh, I imagine it was, because we had a sale, sold everything.
On the sale day, I went and hid because I didn't want to leave. But then, of course, they knew all the hiding places, so they found me.
We still took a cow to town, 1 or 2 cows, I don't know what it was, and milked in town. Of course, that was my freshman year that we moved. See, we were still out on the farm when school first started, freshman year. Of course, I'd never been to a big school. All I knew was that little old country school. So that was different to ride the bus to Bridgewater to go to school. But then we moved that, I think we moved that fall, didn't we? And then I went to school the rest of the time there in town.
Did you like moving to town? Or?
Oh, yeah, because we got to see more people, got to go more. I got to run around a little bit more.
Then I was old enough to babysit when we moved into town. That's what I did until I was almost 19 with the different families and things. So I think the farm was about the best memories.
I think one of the greatest memories that probably stuck with me, that bothered me a lot, was the fact that when I was in grade school and when I went off to high school, was the fact that I didn't have a dad. Everyone else seemed to have a father, and I didn't. My brother Marvin was one of my greatest supporters and still is. And he's one that I respect and is a second dad. And he replaced my dad in such a way. And we shared a bed together. And for some reason or other, I know that I could find comfort with him, and I can still do that. And so that's been a great thing that I remember is that. I remember my first day of high school. We rode the bus for the first time. We got there early. I needed a haircut. And I think it cost 35 cents for a haircut. And I went to the barber shop to get a haircut. Stood outside until the barber came. He came, unlocked the door about 7:45. School didn't start till about 8:45, so I had plenty of time. Got in, and he started to ask me who I was. I'd never had an uptown haircut in my life before. We always got our haircuts from Jake Ensign Dolton. And sat down, and he asked me who I was, and I thought I felt something wet. He'd been chewing tobacco, and a great big bunch of tobacco ran down the back of my neck. And that's how I went to school the first day, being ridiculed with tobacco stains all the way down the back of my white T-shirt that I wore, that I was so proud of being able to wear a white T-shirt. And I guess that had a real adverse effect on me as a memory of my time when I first entered school and had to fight my way through as long as I lasted until I dropped out of school.
How old were you when you dropped out?
I finished my I finished my first semester is all.
Nowadays, families do not sit around the table to eat their dinner, nor breakfast. And I always think back how we all sat around the table, Dad at one end and Mother at the other end, and us children around the table in the kitchen. And we had to have manners, and that's always been real close to me is sitting around the table, and we had to behave ourselves and clean our plates, and I think that's a fond memory.
And I'll never forget the one time my mom really bragged on me. And when I was 11 years old, Dad had passed away, and Mom was out in the field. Well, everybody was out in the field. They were shucking grain. I thought, well, boy, I'm going to surprise my mother for dinner. So Benny happened to come home for something, and I says, Benny, help me catch 2 chickens. And he helped me catch 2 chickens, and we chopped their heads off, and I went and cleaned the chickens and gutted them and everything, because I had watched Mom a lot. And I went and fried chicken. When she come home to get dinner, I had chicken frying in the skillet. And I was so proud of myself. And I'll never forget when she went to family get-togethers, her brothers and sisters and all. My mom always had to brag about that, only being 11 years old.
My life at one time changed drastically when I enlisted in our army, and I didn't get but to Fort Snelling, Minnesota, and didn't pass the physical, and one thing led to another, and I wound up at Senator. I spent 33 months there. They weren't pleasant. Had a lot of time to think about a lot of things. Actually, I think she visited me once, but I was on the phone quite often with her. But she decided that I'd had enough down there, and so I think it was Marvin and her came down, and I slipped out of the back door and got in the car and went home. I don't think I'd ever got out of there if I hadn't have done that particular little stunt. Later on, of course, in my life, it caught up with me, and I wound up at Kearney and had major surgery, and to this day, everything has been wonderful.
I remember the day I came home from the cornfield when I was 19, and I felt the Lord calling me into the ministry. I did a lot of weeping that day. I cried, and I suppose I looked like a mud fence, because when you're picking corn and all the dust and everything, and your tears running down your cheek. But I know I walked in that day at noon and had my dinner, and Mom could see there was something going on. And I said, Mom, I feel that I must prepare for the ministry. But I said, I'm concerned about the farm and all the work. But what she said was, Marvin, if you feel called to preach, you go. God will take care of things. I think that is the one thing that fascinated me the most, and I've never forgotten it. And she just took hands off, and the Lord saw us through.
If there was one thing that I really remember about both of our parents, but particularly our mother, was the fact of her hospitality. She was the most hospitable woman alive. She blessed us so by inviting every missionary that came, every minister that ever came to our church. She had them over. I don't have a clue today how she ever fed them all, but it seemed as though 1 or 2 more didn't make any difference. She had a table full, and it was always enough. But it exposed us to a world of things that no one ever could ever imagine, of what she did for us in doing that.
Definitely. She was a very hospitable woman. She would can beef, and when she canned beef, she'd have someone take her to church on Sunday morning. Usually she rode along with Albert and Lydia Dirksen to church, and she'd look around, and if there was someone that she could invite for dinner, she would go and invite them for dinner, and then she'd say to Albert, Lydia, I have a way home, and she'd take them home. She'd open the jar of beef, put it on. She had some potatoes peeled. She'd put them in the cooker, the pressure cooker, and she'd have a few other things. And in 30 minutes, she had the meal on the table. She was very hospitable.
She would say, no matter what, we're going to be able to do this. She really stepped forward in all, and of course, we can see that in the many years her being a widow.
I see my mother as someone that was very humorous, loved to laugh, loved a good joke, but an extremely hard worker, and was able to innovate and come up with all kinds of solutions for a lot of problems around the world. Regardless of what it was, she could come up with a solution for it.
How she could handle 7 kids. We all respected Mother. When she said something, we knew she meant it. We really respected her. And she was such a worker, such a good cook.
She had to keep us in line, and but she always provided for us, and always was there when we needed her. She was wonderful to us kids.
Very strong. There isn't anything that she wouldn't try or she wouldn't do. If she couldn't do it, there had to be a reason. She either couldn't lift it or couldn't move it. But other than that, she done everything. And I think all of us kids are kind of like that. We do it or it can't be done.
A hard worker, loved to bake, famous for her cucumber pickles, had a big garden, industrious, on the go. Those are the kind of things that I recall. I don't remember that she drove.
Nou, wel even ga ik zo nog het plotje studeren. Ja, ik leef ik moet al een kwartje naar voren, want ik toen voorhoud. Ik checkte alles hier en lachte alles. Ze meen ik verstond nog niet. Ja, ik ga allemaal kort voor dat ik weet dat moet ik te handelen.
I remember at celebrating a Grandma Tena day and all of the grandchildren getting together and singing a special song to celebrate her birthday or just to celebrate her life.
Whereas you have devoted a lifetime to your family and caring for their physical and spiritual needs, and whereas you have been both mother and father to your 7 children for the past 43 years, and whereas your willingness to provide many services for your friends and neighbors, and whereas you have often shared your garden and food with others, and whereas you are a living example of the type of person Bridgewater can be proud of, and whereas you have been a resident of the city of Bridgewater for many years, now therefore I, Robert L. Long, Mayor of the city of Bridgewater, join your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and many friends in proclaiming this 4th day of July in the year 1982 as Tena Engbrecht Day.
Grandma Tena's pickles will always be an important part of the Engbrecht history, and that has become a tradition. We always look forward to somebody finding that recipe and producing those pickles because they sure were delicious.
Christmas probably would be a favorite time. And getting together with family, that would be just lots of fun. Opening up Christmas gifts, eating. There was always lots of food. Grandma had lots of food available. Different kinds of Christmas goodies, candies. It was just fun to be at Grandma's house. There probably are some neat stories about Grandma's house and about the registers upstairs and being able to listen in on adult conversation as a child. There was some unique features in that house. The little tiny bathroom that was added that you could hardly turn around in, but I'm glad you could. The pantry that was stocked fairly well. There's just some neat memories that I have. I have pictures of our children as they were growing up with Grandma in the house, and she always had something that available to give to the kids. She was not without something. She was very resourceful.
I would say that the most impressive characteristic from my dad was his spiritual leadership.
He was such a generous person.
He was really patient with a person.
Everything that I remember, it was that he was extremely generous, he was kind, he had a firmness about him, but the firmness came through kindness and not in any other way. It wasn't something that was that he would yell. I don't ever remember hearing him yell that I can recall. But he was certainly someone that disciplined in a very unique way.
Strict. Understanding. He'd listen to us. At least he did to me. He'd listen to me first, whatever the problem was, and then he would comment on it, and then he would say, now let's try and do better next time.
Dad again was firm, very firm, but a loving and kind, and of course knew when he became ill what a sad day that would be when he would have to leave Mother with us children.
He was a kind man, and he was always doing something to further the family, although it was sad to lose a dad so early in his life.
He was Sunday school superintendent.
I did not know it until just a few years ago that he had actually, I didn't recall it, that he had actually attended a Bible school in Mountain Lake, Minnesota at one time, taken some courses there. He knew his Bible well. He witnessed it, not, he just lived his witness. People could come and share with him, and he loved to share, and great guy.
I felt so privileged to know that my dad and mom were born-again Christians. As I'm older now, I know the importance of that.
They're both such church goers.
I would say their dependence on the Lord. I can't vision it any different than that, because hardworking and yet just committed to the Lord. The plans or the decisions that had to be made were all made because they trusted in God.
And I've never ever heard a harsh word between my mom or dad.
Do you think they ever disagreed?
Well, if they did, they never let us know it. I don't know if they ever did. I asked Mom one time, didn't you ever argue or something? No. She told me no.
I think that there is a lot of fortitude and determination and stick-to-itiveness that has been carried down to my generation, that we'll just go ahead and do whatever we need to do to get the job done. We'll give it our very best effort, and if we fail, we will fail doing it well. That's what I believe I've inherited from my grandparents.
Well, I don't know if I should mention this, but Ann always teases me and says, oh, come on, Tina, what are you doing? And I guess it's because of my work ethic. I think I learned that the most from my mother. And of course, our son Dave says that too. Come on, Tina, slow down. I was always moving fast and going fast.
Well, all I can remember is just work hard.
In an early age, I got to know how to work. When I was as a youngster, I always had to bring the cobs and the coal and stuff like that in. And, I think a person continues with that, working as a family and doing things together, which should be done more often.
They're just very hard workers, and probably they carry on with a tradition of gardening. That seems to be a big one.
Well, I know I carried working in the garden, doing a lot of canning. That stayed with me, and I still like to do that.
Not having someone in my teen years to model for me, I had to do a back roll and go back and when I first became a parent, I wanted to be able to be what I expected my dad to be and what I remembered of him. And I wanted to be that disciplinarian, yes, but yet kind. His taking us to Bible school, even that year when he was so sick, and being there really said a lot for each of us. And it was something, I think, that I wanted to carry on and make sure that my family, my children, would be able to understand where we came from.
The traditions that we hold also include very strong ties to the Christian faith, to our Mennonite background, but more importantly, to present a strong focus on our relationship, a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and that has been foremost in my grandfather Marvin, in my mother Jolynn, and now to me and my brothers, and as well as to many of the cousins in our family. Ministry is an important part of that, having had a grandfather who chose ministry as his professional, his calling, and I feel that has been carried on to me as well.
I'd like to hope that what I see in my children and my grandchildren now, that it's scary when you look to children and grandchildren because they're so much like you were and what you taught them. And that's a little bit scary. But I would hope that they would love to laugh and learn to laugh, but enjoy life to the fullest. Don't hide your own feelings or your own self or your own Christian witness under a bushel. Let it shine. Let other people know that Christ is alive in our lives. And to me, that's extremely important. I hope they see that. I hope I can model that for them.
I'm thankful that the Lord gave me 6 brothers and sisters. I'm really happy about that. So it gave me an opportunity to share, and even though we do it with a round robin these days, it is a time when we can just have a wonderful time, especially getting together. But I'm glad that they taught me how to learn to love the Lord and to follow His direction. And I want to just continue to serve Him to the end of my days.
My prayer is that in years to come, that we would not forget where we came from. We'll never know where we're going if we don't know where we came from.
The only thing I can say is I have a wonderful, wonderful heritage. Tremendous.